conversation about racial disparities and essential workers and COVID. My name is Kat. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a second-year student at the University of Houston. And the reason why I'm here and I care about having this conversation today is because a lot of my family members are essential workers. And a few months back, we got COVID. And so through that, I realized how hard it is to be an essential worker of color, especially during this time. And if you don't speak English or you have to live, paycheck by paycheck. And so that is why I personally think having this conversation today is so important. And I'll hand it off to Joshua so he can introduce himself.
Hey guys, my name is Joshua. My pronouns are he and him. I'm currently a senior enrolled into Milby High School. My reason for being a part of this program is to give an opportunity for me to participate in politics and its effects upon our communities. I want to provide a better future for our city and help guide our youth into future leaders of our nation. And we're both part of the Shift Press Community Convo Fellowship. Yay!
Adriana, would you like to introduce yourself real quick?
Hello,
Um,
my name is Adriana Castillo. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I graduated from Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota in 2018, and I've been considered an essential worker from the moment that the COVID outbreak began. I work in store leadership for HEB, and I have been working pretty much ever since everything started. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. So we mentioned that we're part of the Shift Press Community Conversations Fellowship. So Shift Press is a youth-led, youth-produced publication that highlights the ways that young people build, influence, and experience power in the greater Houston area. This fall, they recruited a group of Houston youth, a couple of us, to host a series of community conversations related to COVID-19 via Zoom and other social media platforms.
Now, the purpose for this community conversation is to help us build a space for young people, uh, to help us build a space by young people for young people, to facilitate conversations around COVID-19 and its effects on the greater Houston area community. Now, this community conversation will be led by a youth-led discussion and hopes of creating a welcoming environment that connects audience organizations to get excited to do the groundwork with Houston organizations and other community members. First, we're going to start to get rolling this whole meeting right now. We're going to get in with an icebreaker. This icebreaker will be containing a couple questions for you guys, for the audience. So feel free to type in the chat box whatever you guys want, whatever prompts in your head. So, first question: what do you hope to get out of this conversation? Do you get to hope knowledge, anything, references, or content info, or just information on the topics that we're going to discuss? Second question: why are you here? Are you here because like you got someone invited you to a link? Are you a friend of ours, or are you? I don't know. What would make you more interested in participating in future community conversations? Is it different topics or ability to enact upon it, power to protest or find some type of way to change our community impacts or whatever floats your boat? Feel free to type in the chat whatever you want.
Yeah, we'll give you guys a minute to do that.
I'll have a watch.
Okay, Andrew, I hope to learn more about what defines an essential worker and how this relates to the roles people play in societies. Yeah, that's a really good goal for this conversation. And we'll definitely be talking about, what defines an essential worker.
And hopefully by the end of this conversation, you'll have a new perspective and vision upon what really is the difference between an essential worker and what are the impacts over this community and the nationwide. Also, also the last one, with the response.
Oh, Mandy, I hope to hear about the experiences of essential workers both before and after COVID. Oh, yes, definitely. I'm sure Adriana will have more, you know, information to give us about that. Brittany, I'm here because one, I'm mystery. Two, many of my family members are essential workers. I hope to learn more about how essential workers might see themselves and their own work highlighted right now in comparison to non-COVID times. Yeah,
Really awesome.
definitely. Hmm.
Mhm.
Alrighty, so let's get into the essential worker aspect of this conversation. So, according to the US Department of Homeland Security, the definition of an essential worker or essential workers are those who conduct a range of operations and services that are typically essential to continue critical infrastructure operations. Critical infrastructure is a large umbrella term encompassing sectors from energy to defense to agriculture. But we want to ask you guys, what do you guys think defines an essential worker? Who is an essential worker and who isn't?
Please feel free to type that down in the chat.
If anyone wants to chime in as well, or we will let you um
An
unmute
opportunity to
yourself
speak.
and yeah. All right, Mandy. I think essential workers are the people with jobs foundational to keeping society running. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely that. Yeah, I agree with that definition.
Yeah, I feel like most people who are in that type of business, or not business, but in that field of jobs and everything like that, that's the foundation of America. That's what we were built upon. And it's sometimes it's very dumb for political leaders or anyone to say that we don't need those or to get rid of them, you know?
Hmm. Andrew, same, but I kind of feel like the definition is pretty fluid depending on the industry. Yeah, absolutely. I did a little bit of research beforehand, and some people who are considered essential workers are those that work in transportation, construction workers, essential staff, even for religious organizations, childcare, retail, people in food production, water and other social services. And so, this really does depend on like the state and the area you live in. But, we want to ask you, Adriana, who do you think, just from your perspective and, your job role, how would you define an essential worker?
With
Like,
everything going on right now, with COVID, a lot of people think that essential workers are just the doctors and the nurses and the first responders that have been dealing with the virus and the people who have the virus person to person. um, so I guess direct contact, but um, like you mentioned in the definition, it's people who are considered essential in maintaining the infrastructures of society. And so
mm,
um, I never, throughout this entire
mhm,
pandemic, I never considered myself to be an essential worker until somebody straight up was like, well, you're gonna go to work, you're going to work every day, you're putting your life on the line just because of the amount of contact and exposure that we have to people. So I guess for me, like that's what it's been now. It's the people who are working in the food industry, like you mentioned, people who own
mhm,
restaurants and are still, like selling food. It's the people who, like myself, are running grocery stores, um, public transportation, Ubers, compared to New York, for example. Like I have a couple of friends who live in New York who had to leave when everything broke out because it was considered an epicenter. And now, Texas has become one of the states with like
yeah,
a bunch of cases.
mhm,
So for them, the essential workers were only people in healthcare. But for us, it's become, you know, the food industry, the energy sector, all of the people who are, hold on, I was going to say something, but I was going to say all of the people who are working to make sure that we have things working. But there are
Yeah.
people who work in the energy sector, like you said, who are working from home. So I wouldn't consider them to be essential because they aren't putting themselves in contact with people
Mhm.
who might or might not have the virus. Um, so even though they're essential to our infrastructure, they're not essential. They're not essentially needed physically at work to be doing something. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that changes my definition of essential workers.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. People who work from home, even though they're working like in these industries, are they really essential workers? Also like when we think about essential workers, we usually think about people, I think at least I think about people um who have that jobs that are less valued, but like a business executive or someone in a higher position can definitely be considered an essential worker. It just really depends, the work that they're doing.
Right.
And I got a little question, either for you guys or for the audience. But do you guys believe that, in comparison to essential workers and like the rest of the workers in the world or nation or whatever, do you think they are all treated fairly? Because there's topics where essential workers sometimes they don't get paid enough, or in this pandemic, either they're having to work more hours and having to go through the risk of getting COVID-19 themselves. Do you think they're really getting treated fairly as compared to the other workers in the field? Not field, but like in the either higher class or any other area?
Absolutely not. And I think that's where the racial disparities come into play because I, so I'm in store leadership, right? And if you are from Houston and you go to HEB, you know that like we have store leaders, we have our partners who are the people who wear the red shirts or the blue
Mhm.
shirts. Um, Most of the people who are considered essential workers who are showing up to work are people of color. They're your black and brown folks. They're, people who need these jobs and do not have the privilege of saying, well, I'm not going to show up to work because I don't want to be exposed. It's the people who need to because they have no other choice and it's the only way that they can make their money. Um, it's not fair because at the same time, these are the people who might not have health insurance or who do not have the money to be paying, like, you know, do not make enough money to, say, I'm going to take a break from work because I'm scared of this virus. So, no, like, there's definitely an issue with people glorifying, or not necessarily glorifying, it might not be the right word, but I feel like there's an issue with people elevating essential workers to be heroes when that's not what we signed up for. We didn't sign up to be part of a pandemic where we're being exposed to people that we do not know. And, especially with being in Texas and our governor believing his certain things, there are people who choose not to wear masks, and I can't force them to, even if I wanted to, And so for me to be dealing with that and dealing with having to make sure that my employees feel safe at work, it just, it's a much bigger issue. And I feel like I just went on a rant, but I had to say all of that.
That's
No, that's a really good
that's
point.
awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to add something just real quick from my personal experience. It made me think of my mother is a custodian, and when we got COVID, yeah, that definitely was a problem. Like, my mom didn't sign up to be a hero or an essential worker and to be forced to work through a pandemic. But because that's what, the I mean the Texas or state government, you know, says like, oh, they have to go to work because they're government employees and because, my mother relies on healthcare, as you said, people who they can't afford stay home and not go to work, or they can't afford to say, you know what, I'm not going to go to work. We're not going to go, because they could lose their job, right? And so, um, yeah, I think it's just so unfair that they have to go through this and navigate. And I remember, I had to have a conversation with the administration, and advocate for my mom. And so that was really hard as well because my mom doesn't speak English. And yeah, I just think about that, how people of color, people who are immigrants or don't speak English, how they're navigating all of this. Yeah, so thank you for bringing up that point. And I see, Amanda, you've said something. Let me, I closed it. Okay. I don't know enough about this, but I think I've heard that there have been pushes for hazard pay for essential workers. Pushes for hazard pay. So hazard pay, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, Mandy? What does it exactly hazard pay mean? Like if they get the COVID-19 or
I think it's in regards to having to show up to work, so getting paid a little more because you are going to work. Is that
oh,
what
because you're putting yourself, yeah. Okay.
That sounds really good. I'd like to share a little personal experience too, because my father got fired from his job at landscape at his little landscaping business, and throughout that time, this was the beginning of summer, the beginning of the pandemic and stuff like that, and it was a really hard time for us because I live alone with him. There's nobody else. We don't really have much family. So when it came to paying bills or just eating, that was kind of tough for us. We had to just find whatever hustle was out there and just do whatever we could, not to survive because I don't want to sound too drastic, but to to be living in a comfortable area and just be comfortable. And yeah, the that was a really harsh time, and I know there's a lot of families that went through worse, especially like in low income neighborhoods and all that stuff. And Adriana and Catherine, you guys mentioned racial disparities, and that's great because that's moving on to our next topic, which is racial disparities. Yeah, fun topic. Yes. Okay. Um, Now, racial disparities, it's defined as existing in a criminal justice system when the proportion of a racial or ethnic group within the control system is greater than the proportion of such groups in the general population. Now, it may involve a racial bias, inadequate access to resources, legislation that disproportionately affects minorities. Now, what that really means is racial disparity. It's a, it's more effective in areas where it's more vulnerable, such as, like I said, in low-income neighborhoods. Right around where I live, it's it's very it's very bad, dude. Like we don't have a lot of more government funds. I live right next to MLK. It's a I don't want to say it's a bad neighborhood because I don't want to talk any mess or anything, but it could be better. Our funding could be better. The government or anyone or could send out help to fix for roads, fix for better stores, or just have a more community help and support for the families in there. And I sense that since racial disparity is mostly found in that neighborhood or neighborhoods like that, or in mine, since we are mostly minorities and minorities are treated differently than um, other people. And that's really something that we gotta talk about and probably solve in the future, either with time. Now, Adriana, I got a question for you.
Mhm.
Now, given this definition and this little example that I put out, I'm sorry if it was confusing, and your own job role, and your own personal experiences, how do you think racial disparity affects minority communities?
Uh, well, I think I mentioned it earlier when talking about my employees. So a lot of my employees are people of color. My store where I'm at right now is a predominantly Black, low income community, and so a lot of my employees are Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx, um, and so in regards to the hazard pay, my company did a really good job in like giving them an additional amount of money. Like we did $2 more for every hour that was worked, and then they ended up getting a bonus, what is it? Their raises, their annual raises. My employees got them earlier, so like I think they got them at the end of June instead of at the end of October. And so for us, like I'm thankful that I work for a company that takes care of their people, but regardless of the hazard pay, some of these people still don't have health insurance because they're not full-time employees, they're just part-timers. And so the concern was that, and even like all of the medical research regarding COVID has been a lot of the people who are more susceptible and more vulnerable and who have been dying in larger groups are Black and brown communities. And so to know that these are the people who work for like my store, and to know that they're going home worried, concerned, because they don't know what they're being exposed to on the daily, I think that just sums up the experience of being a part of the whole racial disparity during the time of Corona.
Yeah, that's a really great explanation I just gave out there. I have another question for the audience. Feel free to type in the chat whatever you guys feel. And Adriana, please feel free to chime in too.
Mhm.
Now, what seems to be or has been the public reaction to racial disparities in Houston or just in our community? Uh, I see a lot of places that I remember, what was it? I had a manager one time. He was doing hiring flyers or something like that, and he was offering deals from his dental office, stuff like that. And racism, well, not racism, but like people called him out because they told him that he was just hiring like white employees and Hispanic employees. But that was just, I believe he said that it was just because those were the ones who run our neighborhoods and those were the ones that spoke the languages better than, you know, blacks, which was kind of it was kind of discriminating, but it's him. And that's an example of what just in our community, what we have to deal with and what goes around in that topic of matter. Kat, do you have anything to say? Oh,
Yeah,
let's actually read the chats. Like,
oh yeah. Oh, I just saw some people. Okay, Andrew, a lot of calls for action, but little being done. Absolutely. And then you saw massive interest from average Houston folks to see the local government step up, but no action from government. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we've seen, people, local leaders like Lina Hidalgo going against our governor, Mayor Turner. I was watching the news, I think maybe a month ago or two, and Mayor Turner was addressing the number of deaths on a certain day, and he said that 8 out of the 10 deaths for that day in Houston had been from people in Black and Brown communities. And so, like Adriana said, the stats do show that a lot of people who are being affected by COVID right now are Black and Brown people. And so, yeah,
and
I go ahead, Joshua. Yeah,
and
I
that
was.
number can oh okay and that number can be prevented if we are given the same level of fairness that other communities from not around our neighborhoods could be given. I feel like that number could have been decreased a whole lot more because we are in low developed not low developed neighborhoods and communities due to racial disparity and other just disadvantages. We they or the communities are not given enough treatment or attention as it should be, and that's why that number is so drastically high. And when it comes to minorities and just that field.
Absolutely. I saw I know when in my neighborhood East End, when the pandemic started, there weren't that many, testing centers, and so I think, yeah, a lot of deaths, or a lot of the people who have been affected um by COVID, like they could have been saved or they could have been helped if we had more funding and more testing centers beforehand. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. Adriana, do you have anything to chime in about this question, what has been or what seems to be the public reaction to these racial disparities in Houston or in our country?
I think there's a lot that I think there's a lot that I want to just say. I think that the racial disparities have come into play with the reaction to the pandemic, depending on your political party. And if you are on one side, you strongly believe that wearing a mask and maintaining your distance and doing whatever you can to stay safe, because it's a humanitarian cause, not because it's a selfish, like personal cause. I think that that's one side. And then you have the other side who believes that it is their right to not wear a mask because this potential COVID is a hoax. And I think that those people have chosen to not care about not just their environment, but of other people, especially. So, like for me, my personal experience when it comes to being at my store, I have those very right winged people who show up without their mask. And unfortunately, I can't force them to put something on. And that affects my people because my people are a part of these low income communities of color. And they're concerned because they're like, well, it's not right that I have to be dealing with this person who chooses to be selfish and doesn't care about anybody else but themselves, who wants to like come check their groceries out in my lane and they're not wearing a mask, you know? Oh my gosh, I can go off and off on a tangent, but I'm just going to stop. But that's like my personal experience when it comes to the racial disparity and government reactions. I think that the political parties and our leader of a president has, I think it's made the public be concerned and not know what to believe. And so I think that that also just plays into how you choose to react. And I think that people of color have reacted some people of color have reacted in the, oh, I'm gonna stay safe and I'm gonna do what I can to protect those around me. And then we also have those people of color who have chosen to not care, because I have seen, you know, quinceañeras happening. I have seen big family gatherings happening, weddings, and I think we're in October and this started in March, so it's been like what, almost, it feels like it's been 9 months. I don't know. It's been a while, and I my hope is that people aren't getting complacent with knowing that, it hasn't affected them yet, so they're not going to care. But then again, like, we have fall coming, and I have employees who have lost families because of this, and I have one of my employees who's still in the ICU. So for me, this isn't a joke. It's not a game, regardless of like the government trying to do something or say something or people reacting another way. Like, yeah, I have a lot to say. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And
That was really powerful.
yeah, that I think people can forget how like real all of this is. We forget, that we're not just like we're like individuals, with experiences and lives, and so yeah.
Yeah.
You have to keep in mind that we all have really deep reasons for why we, care about keeping our loved ones safe and, who we work with.
Yeah.
So, let me just check the chat and Oh, Andrew said, oh, that sounds awful. Yeah. This is all, you know, really hard to talk about. It's really sad.
Yeah.
So now we want to talk about the intersection between essential workers and racial disparities. And I think we've already kind of talked about a little bit about that, but we want to ask you guys in the audience, how do, you know, we, the youth, or, you know, people in Houston, how do we feel about racial disparities? And I think some of us we've answered this, but how do racial disparities, you know, connect to essential workers? And if you guys, yeah, can go ahead and write this in the chat, or if you want, feel free to hop on and just speak your opinion.
Also, I'm sorry, guys. I feel like I'm going on a rant with my answer.
No, you're fine.
That's awesome.
We're doing good with time. You're keeping yeah, we're keeping the time, so no worries. Wow. Yeah. Agree with Mandy.
Pop
We
off.
love-
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, we really love your perspective, and I'm so glad that you're here, and thank you, you know, for everything that you shared. Well, yeah, I think, you know, oh, any tips we can do? Yeah, absolutely. We have some, so I think, you know, right now it's really hard. Oh, for Adriana, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Adriana. Yeah, can you give us any tips on what we can do?
So
Even
before we continue with all of this, let me just say that my personal views and my statements and my words do not reflect those of the company that employs me, even though I do work for an awesome company. My views do not reflect everything that they believe, you know? So just want to say that.
yeah,
I need tips on what we can do. As the youth, uh, I'm hopeful for the future because I have seen what a lot of the youth is doing, and it excites me because I see that a lot of them are going in the right direction in terms of, you know, pursuing racial justice, pursuing climate change, pursuing all of the things that older generations chose to not really care about, kind of, sort of, and like left those problems to us. So I'm hopeful in that sense. In regards to COVID, put your mask on, don't party. I mean, you could party, but put your mask on. Youth and grocery store attendees. If you feel sick, do not show up to a store. If you are coughing, do not show up to a store. Um, if you live in a household with little kids and you're able to babysit them while your parents go shopping, do that, because I am tired of seeing little babies, newborn babies, young toddlers at a store without a mask on, regardless of whether they are susceptible or not. I'm pretty sure they are because a lot of cases came out of a freaking elementary school not too long ago. Um, you know, do what you can to help out your family, and like if it's just your parents that need to go grocery shopping and you're able to do that, then that'd be one of the things I recommend in grocery stores.
I think those are, yeah, those are really great tips. And oh, live comment. Can y'all read the comments? Yeah. So,
Which ones?
yeah,
All of them?
the oh, any tips? You also asked, are there any tips on what we can do? And then, you know, even at HEB, and that was Adriana, sorry, Adriana's response.
Fine, girl, you're fine. You said it fine.
Righty, and yeah, so Joshua, do you want to go ahead and I know you had some ideas about, what we can do as the youth, to kind of help, with all of these issues that we're talking about.
Oh, well, first off, being a part of these programs such as this one, the fellowship and Mi Familia Vota, these are great examples of what we can do as a community, as the youth, as teens to advocate for not just our rights, but for the rights of everybody else, for the rights of minorities, for those who are racially uh, judged, you know. This program is an example of what we, the youth, can do. And we have so much potential to fight for ourselves and change our future, like I just said. Programs like these are just the beginning of what we are capable of. And now, speaking about the youth involvement and community issues, I got a little question for y'all. How can we react to it? How can we react to the issues that we're presented upon every day, politically, nationally, community, city-wise? And how do we spread awareness of these issues? And how do we get people to advocate for it, to take action? Please feel free to type that in the chat if you guys think.
Oh, I like Andrew's comment. So Andrew said, empathy is a great first start, and I find having campaigns that highlight the essential workers could bring light to people and their personal stories. Um, yeah, I agree with that. Empathy is so important. It's important, to have empathy when having conversations like these. I think um, we should have more conversations, and we just have to be willing to hear each other out, and we don't have to do anything like formal, we can just talk to whether it's someone like, in your family or like at the dinner table, those sorts of things, they do, make an impact. And yeah, I also like your point about campaigns that highlight essential workers. I've seen a lot of those. I know Alicia Keys wrote a song called Good Job for Essential Workers. And so it's little things like that, all of us coming together and yeah, trying to like bring light and make this situation better, that all helps, and giving other people space to know, to share their experiences and their personal stories.
And the
Um,
best part about, sorry.
Go ahead, Joshua.
Okay. And the best part about empathy and sharing experiences is that that's a very great way to reach out to people. Like for the audience example, or just anyone who's listening. That's the way that we can find a connection and get more people to get involved into programs such as these. It all starts with someone opening up, and there's always someone else that can share that experience or share that feeling or show that frustration when it comes to issues and topics such as these. So that's really great that there's sympathy and we have a way to open up to each other.
Adriana, we just want to ask you for, one last comment before you go. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to the conversation?
Um, well, wear your mask. Thank you guys for inviting me. I hope I was helpful in joining in the conversation, even though I did rant a little bit sometimes. But I mean, I'm glad that this is happening and you guys are having these engagements because it just not only does it bring awareness, but it reminds people of it's kind of like a call to action type of thing. And so thank you guys so much for letting me join your space. I appreciate it. And if you guys ever
Thank
need
you.
anything, I'm only an email away.
Thank you so much, Adriana. Thank you for being here with us. I see a comment from Andrew. Also, appreciation of essential workers and thinking about opportunities to uplift and support beyond the workplace, like supporting essential workers and their families, schooling, and neighborhoods, etc. Building community and a heart. Yeah. Oh, that's so, yeah. absolutely agree with that. Well, with that, we'll end. Thank you so much again for being here. We really do want to make this like a sort of call to action, conversation. Please reach out to your local advocacy groups. We and Joshua mentioned one, Mi Familia Vota, which they do a lot of, voting and advocacy work. And, you're join like, clubs in your high school or at your college. And yeah, follow Shift Press at Shift Press on virtually all social media platforms. We thank everyone who tuned in for today's community conversation. And, we have community conversations. We'll be having more every week, Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Yeah, so until next week's conversation, we'll see you guys at the same time. Thank you so much. Bye. See you later.
Bye.